How's it going, everyone? There was a big NASA announcement just a couple days ago on September 10th that NASA's Mars rover discovered potential biosignatures on Mars. Now, this is a huge announcement. We're going to go through NASA's article and I'll explain the details of what this means. This is an amazing announcement, amazing discovery, possibly the most exciting space exploration news since the moon landing. On the other hand, there are some exaggerated interpretations going around. NASA didn't discover that there were bears roaming Mars or anything like that. We are talking about microbial life. So let's get into the article. At the beginning, there is a video that they've created, so I'll play the video and I'll talk through it as well, explaining different parts, and then we'll go through the article. So billions of years ago here, they're probably referring to 3.7 to 4 billion years ago, when Mars had conditions that were likely suitable for microbial life. What's interesting is that Earth also had microbial life at that time. So it's possible Earth and Mars both had microbial life at the same time. That's pretty cool. And so here we see running water, and we're about to move forward through time. So here we see the present day, conditions dried up over time, and the Mars rover is there collecting what remains. Okay, let's get into the article. So, a sample collected by NASA's Perseverance Mars rover from an ancient dry riverbed could preserve evidence of ancient microbial life. I might be mispronouncing the names here. Jezero crater, taken from a rock named Chiava or Chiava Falls last year. The sample, called Sapphire Canyon, contains potential biosignatures according to a paper published Wednesday. Okay, so potential biosignatures. So it contains samples that could be evidence that life existed there. So a biosignature, here we go. A biosignature is a substance or structure that might have a biological origin but requires more data or further study before a conclusion can be reached. Quote, this finding by Perseverance, launched under President Trump in his first term, is the closest we have ever come to discovering life on Mars. Okay, this is a very big deal. The indication of a potential biosignature on the red planet is a groundbreaking discovery and one that will advance our understanding of Mars, said acting NASA Administrator Sean Duffy. NASA's commitment to conducting gold standard science will continue as we pursue our goal of putting American boots on Mars's rocky soil. Okay, so what we're going to see here is that there's only so much that the Mars rover can do in terms of research. And so either you need to bring the samples back to Earth, or you need to send people to Mars to do more extensive research on these findings. So this statement about putting American boots on Mars, it's unclear if he just means in general that's a NASA mission, or in the context of this research to do more thorough research, American boots need to be on the ground. Now, what's interesting is that when it comes to sending people to Mars, the more difficult task is actually sending them back. Okay, how do you get from Mars to Earth? That's the bigger challenge. Whether we're talking about getting these samples back to Earth, right, the Mars rover's samples, or whether we're talking about getting people back to Earth once they get there, that's a major challenge involved here. Quote, with the publication of this peer-reviewed result, NASA makes this data available to the wider science community for further study to confirm or refute its biological potential. Okay, so now anybody can look at this data and determine, is it from a biological source or not? So more people can be working on this question, so that's good. The rover's science instruments found that the formation's sedimentary rocks are composed of clay and silt, which on Earth are excellent preservers of past microbial life. Okay, so the material that this evidence was found in, when we see that material on Earth, then we see this material is actually really good at preserving evidence or leftovers of past microbial life. So there's reason to believe that what we find in this material on Mars is also evidence of past microbial life, if that's what it looks like. They are also rich in organic carbon, sulfur, oxidized iron, in other words, rust, and phosphorus. Okay? The quote, the combination of chemical compounds we found in the Bright Angel Formation could have been a rich source of energy for microbial metabolisms. End quote, says Perseverance scientist Joel Hurwitz of Stony Brook University, New York, and lead author of the paper. Quote, but just because we saw all these compelling chemical signatures in the data didn't mean we had a potential biosignature. We need to analyze what the data could mean. So this is the scientific method. You have to look for ways that your hypothesis could be negated. You can't just say, oh, hooray, it could be interpreted as evidence of past microbial life, let's celebrate. No, you have to take into consideration every other explanation and see if you can negate those explanations. And they actually show a chart later on that does that. Moving on. While investigating Chiava Falls, an arrowhead-shaped rock measuring 3.2 feet by 2 feet, they found what appeared to be colorful spots. The spots on the rock could have been left behind by microbial life if it had used the raw ingredients, the organic carbon, sulfur, and phosphorus in the rock as an energy source. In higher resolution images, the instruments found a distinct pattern of minerals arranged into reaction fronts, points of contact where chemical and physical reactions occur. The team called leopard spots. Okay, so this was kind of a slang term used to refer to these spots, leopard spots. The spots carried the signature of two iron-rich minerals, vivianite and greigite. Okay, vivianite is frequently found on Earth in sediments, peat bogs, and around decaying organic matter. Similarly, certain forms of microbial life on Earth can produce greigite. Okay, so we're finding substances that on Earth are affiliated with microbial life. Okay, they're found around decaying organic matter, and certain forms of microbial life can produce these materials that we're finding on Mars. The combination of these minerals, which appear to have formed by electron transfer reactions between the sediment and organic matter, is a potential fingerprint of microbial life, which would use these reactions to produce energy for growth. The minerals also can be generated abiotically, which means without the presence of life. That's what, okay, or without the presence of life, they explain it right here. Hence, there are ways to produce them without biological reactions, including sustained high temperatures, acidic conditions, and binding by organic compounds. However, okay, so the abiotic explanations, okay, how could this happen without the presence of life? These actually turn out to be not very likely. Okay, here they're saying, however, the rocks at Bright Angel do not show evidence that they experienced high temperatures or acidic conditions, and it's unknown whether the organic compounds present would have been capable of catalyzing the reaction at low temperatures. So the explanations for how these substances could come about without the presence of life, these explanations require certain conditions, like high temperature conditions, which are actually very unlikely that those conditions would have happened, right? So the presence of life in the past is actually the more likely, the more reasonable explanation. The discovery was particularly surprising because it involves some of the youngest sedimentary rocks the mission has investigated. An earlier hypothesis assumed signs of ancient life would be confined to older rock formations. This finding suggests that Mars could have been habitable for a longer period or later in the planet's history than previously thought, and that older rocks also might hold signs of life that are simply harder to detect. Okay, so in other words, life on Mars could have been more recent than what people previously thought were conditions when Mars was habitable, and that life on Mars could have lasted longer than what people thought was possible in the past. Now, generally, the thought was that Mars had conditions suitable for microbial life about 3.7 billion years ago. As recently as that, Earth also had microbial life at that time, but maybe these findings show that Mars had microbial life even later in its history. So that's quite significant. That's very interesting. It means there could have been a larger window where both Earth and Mars had microbial life. Astrobiological claims, particularly those related to the potential discovery of past extraterrestrial life, require extraordinary evidence, says Katie Stack Morgan, Perseverance's project scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Southern California. Getting such a significant finding as a potential biosignature on Mars into a peer-reviewed publication is a crucial step in the scientific process because it ensures the rigor, validity, and significance of our result, right? So you have other people look at the results to determine if they're valid or not. And while abiotic explanations, so non-biological explanations for what we see at Bright Angel are less likely, given the paper's findings, we cannot rule them out. Okay, just because something is unlikely doesn't mean it didn't happen, right? So we can't tell for sure that Mars definitely had microbial life, but that's the most likely explanation for the evidence that we see. Now, here we actually have the steps that NASA would go through. So first we have detection of a signal known to result from a biological activity. Okay, so this is detection of biogenic signal. Then level 2 is contamination ruled out. Okay, maybe biological material got on the rover on Earth and the rover brought that to Mars, and then that dropped onto the Martian rocks and the rover measured or detected this Earth material, right? So contamination has to be ruled out. Okay, so environmental relevance, right? Like where you are matters. Level 3, demonstration or prediction of biological production of signal in the environment of detection, right? So can you demonstrate that this actually came from where it was detected? Abiotic false positives, discrimination. So this is talking about, could there be non-biological sources to something that is falsely perceived as being biological in its origin? All known non-biological sources of signal shown to be implausible in that environment. That's level 4, right? So yeah, there are non-biological explanations, but they are quite unlikely. And then level 5, additional independent signal from biology detected. Okay, so this is independent biosignatures. Alternative hypotheses eliminated. So future observations that rule out alternative hypotheses proposed after original announcement. So can we rule out some other hypotheses that explain what we're seeing? Okay, confirmation of the presence of biology, independent follow-up observations of predicted biological behavior in the environment. Okay, so this, I think they're talking about the future, right? Follow-up observations of predicted biological behavior. So there's still more work to be done, right? And what was mentioned before, the rover can only do so much, and it would be very useful if these samples could be brought back to Earth and studied more thoroughly. And well, there's a sci-fi plot for you, right? Potential biological material from another world brought to Earth. Or if that can't be done, well then astronauts who get to Mars, hopefully eventually, will be able to do more thorough studies there, or bring the samples back to Earth with them if they cannot be brought back robotically. Among the suite of science instruments is a weather station that provides environmental information for future human missions, as well as swatches of spacesuit material so that NASA can study how it fares on Mars, right? So it's looking at where humans can land, what how humans need to prepare in order to be there while they are there. So this is amazing news, right? Material that is most likely explained by the past presence of microbial life has been found. There are non-biological explanations to this material, but those explanations are unlikely. The most likely explanation for the evidence found is that Mars had microbial life around the same time that Earth had microbial life. That is very cool. That's a huge announcement. I hope you enjoyed that, and until next time.